Welcome back, guys, to yet another World of Warcraft War Within video. Today we are going to be talking about tailoring and some of the profession alt army builds that I plan on using. This is not going to be a full in-depth with all the reasons why, but I'm going to try and cover all the reasons for why I've decided to go for something like this. There are going to be tons of other options, and you can eventually also make these builds a lot better. This is for early days, if you just want to get your ult started and you don't want to lose out on concentration. Now, before we do get into the video, make sure that you guys drop a like on the channel and also subscribe to the channel and put all the notifications on, because that will guarantee that you won't miss a future video, but it also supports the channel and it's great for the algorithm. So there's a bunch of wins there for both of us. But either way, thank you guys very much for that. Now let's get straight into the video. So what I'm talking about today is I'm going to start out with the #1 build that I'm going to be spending time on, which is going to be for the Dawnweave and Duskweave bolts. Now, just to show you guys on stream today, by the way, check out the link down below for the Twitch stream. We're going to be streaming a lot for the War Within. This is what I wrote down. And for the first one, we're looking at daily cooldown bolts. The reason why I wrote 63 skill points, you don't actually need to be at 63 because you can avoid that by a little bit. As you can see, the required skill is 315. I can actually show you that with a lower quality material. You can see if you want to guarantee the rank 2, you need 315. So because of that, you can actually be a lot lower in your profession and just have profession gear if you buy that off the auction house or have an alt make it. But you're going to get up here anyway because you need to get 60 KP, as it also says right here. So all the possible first craft bonuses that you can get your hands on, you want to do. And also, you know, your one-time collectible treasures for that. But 60 KP is actually not that crazy, especially once we've had 1 or 2 resets. Now, I also wrote 3 pieces of profession gear. This is just the green stuff to get your 22 skill points. That's going to be great, lowering the amount of concentration needed. And then I wrote 3 crafts every 5 days at rank 3, otherwise lower ranks. Now, the reason that I wrote that is because the amount of concentration, as you can see right here, is 417. This is going to be a little bit less once we have, you know, some more. We'll have 17 more pieces, so the concentration is going to be a little lower. But concentration of full 1000 takes about 4 days to recharge. So the way that I put this is after 2 crafts, right, for these bolts, I don't have enough for a 3rd one. So after 1 more day, we would have recharged about 250, which means we have enough for 1 more. So that turns into 3 crafts every 5 days. The problem is, even at this point, once you've, by the way, which is what I'm going to show you now, the thing about the recharge timer for these bolts is once you have this setup, and this is the setup that I'm doing because I want to cover both. If you have a lot of ults and you want to min-max how far you get into one, right, you could put these 15 points, you could put over here instead, then that's totally something that you can do. Again, because if you end up using your concentration on something like Dawnweave or Duskweave, you'll be in a situation where you're kind of ignoring the other one, but also not really. Because here's the thing, right? The rank 3s are probably not going to have a lot of demand early on, but once season 3 launches, it'll start getting more use for a lot of the crafted gear that it has uses on, some of the consumables. But these bolts are also used for some of the bags. These, for just an example, these Duskweave bolts are going to be used for Duskweave bags. Now, because these don't have skill, then you don't need to worry about getting the highest possible rank. You just need the cheapest bolt that you can get. And you can have another ult that's spec'd into this, which is another one of the builds that I'm going to be talking about today. And then you can make yourself very, very cheap bags. And whenever, because here's the thing, right? Your concentration is going to recharge slower than these actual available crafts once you're at this build. So you're going to have to craft some of the lower ranks. And again, to just show you guys, this is using rank 2 exquisite Weavercloth bolts, which are not that insane. It's actually pretty easy, even at this point, using rank 3 Weavercloth bolts and rank 3 Stormdust. We can actually make these at a guaranteed level. We might be able to buy these cheaper for other people, but again, these are going to be pretty easy to make, especially for people that are further into the profession. Now, secondly, we do need rank 3 Spools of Dawn Thread or Dusk Thread, depending on which bolt you're making, to be able to do this. But I would wager that this is going to be the air quote cheapest way to get the rank 3s, at least early on. As we get closer to Season 1, people are going to get further and further into their professions. But for alt armies, this is probably going to be your best bets. And again, it's going to take quite a lot of work to get up to 630 to be able to guarantee this. Obviously, the further you get into this build, the less concentration you'll need, which means you can craft more higher ranks for however many that you get, which is, you know, considerably it's pretty important. But this is getting to this point on an alt is super easy. So if you can get a couple thousand gold on each alt very easily out of something like this, then that's great. The next build we're going to talk about is going to be this one, Exquisite Bolts. This also counts for Unraveling, but because these are two completely separate things and the amount of concentration that you also need to be able to min-max both, I do consider them two different builds, but the actual knowledge points that you put into it is the exact same. So if you just want to have one character that can actually either create Exquisite Bolts with concentration or do some Unraveling with concentration, that is up to you, but I will have multiple characters for this. So for Unraveling, you are actually okay at only being at 50 skill point. You probably need a little bit more on Exquisite Bolts just because, you know, that is so many, it's such a high amount of concentration. But again, that's the same thing for Unraveling. So if you can, the higher up you can get on your skill points, the better. This is just what I got to make it doable at all. Now again, this is 60 KP, and I'll show you in a second what that means. And then 3 pieces of green profession gear. That's what we want. That's going to offer you 6 crafts every 4 days at rank 3, otherwise lower ranks. Now to show you what that is, right, we are in Quality Fabric, and that is going to be 30 points into Quality Fabrics and then 30 points into Weaving and Unraveling. And as you can see, that it impacts, again, Weaving, which is bolts, and then Unraveling, which is, of course, Unraveling. 60 points into these two things is what you want to do because of the amount of profession stats you get from here, the amount of skill that you get from here, and some of the profession recipes you actually end up unlocking. That's exactly what you want, just to show you guys some of the bonuses here. Now, when we then take a look at Exquisite Weavercloth Bolts, you guys can see right in front of your noses that the amount of concentration that we use with rank 3 materials, this is, by the way, Storm Dust at rank 3. This might be a little hard to get just because of how enchanting it looks to be. So don't expect that this is going to be super cheap, and you might have to be okay with just using a rank 2 Storm Dust. I unfortunately can't buy any of it on any of these vendors, but that's fine. You're still going to be able to guarantee rank 2s at that point, so you don't even need to worry about that. As for Weavercloth Bolts, if you decide to use lower versions, whichever one that is, I would imagine that Storm Dust is going to be the more expensive version, so I would probably much rather want to cheap out on Storm Dust compared to the actual Weavercloth Bolts, but that's besides the point. If you can use rank 3 materials and it is worth it in terms of how many rank 3 bolts that you can make with the concentration, then that's worth it. But again, this is the thing about concentration. If you can use lower ranked materials and get yourself a much cheaper crafting price on this rank 3, where it justifies the increased amount of concentration, then that might be worth it. I would say that in a lot of cases, it's probably not going to be worth it to do something like that unless it's a very, very, very expensive craft. But this is more of a time-gated thing. Overall, this is not going to be super expensive. This is just time-gating in terms of concentration. So because of that, you have a lower crafting cost just because it's time-gated. And again, here you see at this point in the profession, we're looking at 151 points of concentration. I would say that this is 6 crafts because you're only a couple of points of concentration off. And this is only because I don't actually have the what do you call it, the other pieces of profession gear here, because you can't buy them. You have to craft them on the beta. Either way, once you have that, it'll be less than 150. So you will be able to make 6 of these crafts at rank 3 every 4 days, right? Every time you have a maxed out concentration amount, which is great. That's awesome. And otherwise, we'll be able to make the rank 2s. And if you are to make rank 2s, then obviously you want to cheap out on either Storm Dust or Weaver Cloth Bolts. Or if you're even further into the profession, then maybe you can cheap out on both of the materials. It's something to at least consider. And at this point, you can actually still impact how worth it this is, right? You can go into textile treasures and unlock this tree to get yourself some more resourcefulness, some more multi-craft and things like that. So that's kind of where you would end up eventually. But again, this is just like a early setup your ult, get it going, minimum amount of work to potentially make yourself some gold. Now, again, this is the exact same for the unraveling build. As you can see, just to pop it up again up here, the 50 skill points, right? This doesn't matter. If it's 63, that's even better, and it's not that hard to get here. Then you are going to have 60 knowledge points, 3 pieces of green profession gear, and then you will be able to make, with rank 3, this is important, rank 3 cloth, then you will be able to, again, as you can see, it's 151. It's pretty much the exact same as Exquisite Weaver Cloth Bolts. Oh, I gotta move this out of the way. It's pretty much the exact same as rank 3 Weaver Cloth or Exquisite Weaver Cloth Bolts, which means that when we have the profession gear, you'll be able to do about 6 crafts at the max rank. Now, it's not going to be that interesting for Weaver Cloth because this is something the vast majority of people, even with no knowledge points into the profession, if you have tailoring, you'll be able to get this. You can also get this in webbed ore deposits, in mining, and also you can shuffle into it in alchemy. So this one, I don't think there is going to be a whole lot of potential in terms of unraveling here. It does just give you the regular spools of Weaver thread, but these, right, for Duskweave and Dawnweave, you will not be able to even get these unless you have this learned, right? So you need either you need this tree learned, which unlocks a subspec, so you could immediately start collecting scraps of Duskweave or Dawnweave. But if you want both, then you obviously need to unlock 2 subspecs, which requires 30 points, right? So 30 points into this, you'll unlock both, and then you'll start collecting scraps. Now, the scraps for these pieces, it's 5 scraps of Duskweave to make 1 piece of cloth, 5 scraps of Dawnweave to make 1 piece of cloth. And the interesting thing about this, as you just saw, if we look at something like this, right? The spool of Weaver thread, you'll see 10, you'll see 16, you'll see 18 and things like that. But if you go into Dawnweave, which is, again, the much rarer, same with Dawnweave, Duskweave and Dawnweave, they're both very rare. The amounts that they actually give are much, much, much lower. And that's very interesting because if you look into, for example, Dawn Thread, which we have right here, you need 8 of these to make 1 bolt. And considering we need rank 3s, as I talked about in the previous build, this is something that you could be self-supplying to yourself in a cheaper way because you don't need it that often. It's also used for the 38 slot reagent bags for tailoring. Again, you need 30 here. This doesn't actually matter for what rank it is, but having 1 character that's just designated for it is going to be smart because it, you know, in that build, you also get a little bit of resourcefulness out of it. And then it has its uses for crafted gear, as you can see here. And it also has for an optional crafting reagent and 1 of the spell thread. And the same thing goes for the dusk thread. It has the same kind of uses. Just to show you. It has the same kind of uses, right? It's just the other side of the material. Now, that's important because, as you can see, when we actually are unraveling it, it's a very low amount, right? It's 4, 3, 4, 5. And then there's a profession bag that can increase the yield by 1. But still, this is a low amount, right? It's not very many. So it's a pretty big chance that these are going to be pricey in itself. And then the people that actually also unravel these will early on, because it's a 450 recipe difficulty, you don't need to use concentration, because if you get further, like if you get about 20 points further in, you get yourself some blue profession gear and all that, then that's all good and dandy. But this is from the perspective of an alt army. What can we get away with as little work as possible? And this is what it is, right? So here, you would either do Dawnweave or Duskweave and get yourself the concentrated crafts. The last build that I'm going to talk about today, just to show you guys one more time here, is going to be the regular bags and the profession bags. All you need for this is 30 knowledge points. And the reason why it's only 30 knowledge points is because there is only one subspec node that kind of actually impacts it in the game. And I'm actually just quickly going to log over to the character that has it, that I did the testing on. It's a resourcefulness, right? It has no skill, it has no multi-craft, none of the other profession-related things. The only thing that actually matters is going to be that one particular thing. And I logged into the wrong character, of course. But besides that, besides the 30 knowledge points, which is going to be very easy to get, you have 3 pieces of green profession gear. You want to obviously have resourcefulness on that to min-max how much you can possibly get out of it. But this is the one that you want to talk about. I'm just going to get this out of the way. The extra threads. This is the only one that impacts it, because this increases resourcefulness when you're crafting cloth goods. That's everything in the profession. Once you actually do that, you'll be able to see here that, oh, our resourcefulness is at 7%. You can see I don't have any here. I don't have any of the other tools. So it's 7% once you have that learned. And after that, you can get, you know, resourcefulness on most of your profession gear, which is going to be super, super worth it, especially if you plan on doing a build like that. Now, here's the thing, right? The reason why this is an alt army build, and this is very important, is because when you look not just at the regular bags, because for that, it doesn't really matter, but, right, because that would just be one singular character. But when it comes to these profession bags, every single one of them, except one, will require 150 artisans acuity to purchase, and also 1500 cash, and that's one of the new currencies from Ashkahet. But 150 artisans acuity is quite a lot. So in a lot of cases early on, there's a good chance that you want to have multiple different characters that can actually buy maybe one recipe, or maybe 2 if you want to close it down just a little bit, do a little bit of work on the character, get yourself 300 knowledge points. You actually get, or not 300 knowledge points, 200 artisan security you get instantly on a character, which means you would only have to get the extra 100, which is, for all intents and purposes, pretty easy. But if you want to be lazy and you have a lot of level 70s that you don't mind using for something like this, then all we're talking is 30 knowledge points, the green profession gear, right, with resourcefulness as much as possible. And then you get the 200 artisan security, you get down to Ashkahet, you purchase yourself this, you know, just one of the bag recipes, and then you're good. Then you can start making this, right? This is on the work order system. So if you want to participate in this market, you're gonna have to do work orders, okay? They're bind on pickups, so no getting around that. I also, on the stream that I did today, I went over which ones I probably think will be good. So I'm just gonna quickly go over that so you guys have an idea. I think the alchemy one is going to be good because it increases the chances of finding new recipes from experimentations. Everyone needs to do experimentations in alchemy, so that's super important. That's one alt. Then you have the Dark Moon Duffel. Transcribing a Castlegar Dark Moon card has a 5% chance to create another. For the people that have builds for all the Dark Moon decks and things like that, this is super important. It's also 5%, which is, no matter how low the drop chance is, 5% is quite a lot. So I also think this is a worth it purchase. So that's 2. As for the mining and herbalism ones, these overlap. They impact the overload mechanic, which not a lot of people are going to go for that early on, but there's a lot of the gathering professions will have leftover artisan acuity. So I think there's still a good chance that people are going to craft these, but maybe not early on. It's at least not something that I'm going to focus on. So I'm going to skip over and not purchase these two. Again, this is the herbalism one. As for this one, the cooldown of Sharpen Your Knife recovers 10% faster. Sharpen Your Knife in skinning is a new ability that will guarantee a higher quality ranked material, which is super, super, super important in skinning. This is great. So skinners should take this as a priority. I absolutely think this is worth it. So again, 3 alts here for profession bags. Now, when it comes to this one, we're looking at leatherworking. This will increase your resourcefulness rating by 90 when you're crafting leatherworking reagents. I don't think, just because this costs 150 artisan's acuity, I don't think that leatherworkers are going to want this over their blue profession gear, which they need 3 of, and they cost 300 artisan's acuity each. I don't think this is going to be a priority just because it's resourcefulness, but eventually probably, right? But again, I'll skip that over. 3 profession bags still. Then there's this one. This one, you add, that's a drop from Awakening the Machine, which is one of the new in-game weekly things that you can do. So again, this doesn't cost you anything but time and doing that event, so that's worth it just because of that. You could say that that's still 3 alts, right? Because then on whatever alt you already have bags, maybe you want to do this. Then we're looking at Kesselgar Jewel Crafting. This will increase the maximum yield of crushed gemstones from Algari Crushing by 1. Again, I don't think this is really going to be worth it over blue profession gear. So I'm going to skip this one over and say a maybe on this one. Then we have the amount of resourcefulness, ingenuity, and multicraft provided by Shatter Essence is increased by 20. This again is in enchanting. I don't think that a lot of people are going to be using this mechanic early on. The same thing goes for the ignition one for blacksmithing. So again, I kind of want to not really worry about this one. So we're still only at 3. And then we have here, increases the yield of piles of rusted scrap from most sources by 1. This one I do, however, think is a high potential for engineers, just because piles of rusted scrap is something you're going to be doing a lot. I'd say a high maybe for this one. Same for the jewel crafting. So if you want to consider those two, I guess we're at 5 alts right now, and this is just a dust weave and dawn weave bag. Those are not profession bags. So in this case, right, if you just want to focus on the best ones, which are probably going to be the best ones early on that people will maybe purchase, then that's 5 alts. But if you want to cover every single one, and of course, there's going to be people that are wanting these crafted eventually anyways. So you want to have these alts ready for when that comes around. Or if you're in trade chat, you're trying to sell these work orders, or if you see people with public orders, you can relog, then that's super important. So again, that'll cover a lot, right? That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 total alts. But again, the build is simple. All you need is 30 points into extra threads, and then at that point, we're talking profession gear with as much resourcefulness as possible, and then you are just crafting it in the cheapest possible way that you can. If the people that are obviously offering this to you, if they don't want to provide their own materials, then you are just going to go for the lowest quality material. But again, in most cases, I would imagine that people actually just provide their own materials for these. But you can always let them know that the lower ranks, if they're cheaper, is something that they could consider. But that's it for tailoring. As for what I am going to be interested in for alts early on, there are a couple other options, and this might change a little bit for launch. So make sure that you check in on the streams, because over on Twitch, there's a link down below to the live stream. I will be live streaming pretty much, I want to say every day for almost 2 weeks, and it'll be 8 to 12 hour streams. So no matter your time zone, you should be able to potentially catch some of the hours. Maybe if you're on the Europe side of the world, then you'll be able to catch a lot. If you're maybe in Australia, or if you're in the US, it might be only half of the stream. But either way, I'd appreciate it if you guys came over to check it out. And as always, if you did make it this far into the video, I appreciate it. And make sure that you type pencil, even though I know this isn't one. Type pencil, down in the comments below. Then I know that you've watched until this point. If you guys have any questions about these builds, make sure that you drop that down in the comments below as well. And I just want to mention as a thing again, these builds are the minimum. I want to say the minimum requirement for actually potentially getting something out of it. These can be way better. You can put way more effort into them. You can get way more skill points, way more knowledge points, and all of that jazz. But that also is a certain amount of time that you spend on one character instead of making multiple, right? Because say that one of these builds that I talked about today, if we're talking about the daily cooldown pulse, say that one tune will be able to make you, we're just going to say 10,000 gold every day. Not that that's the case. We don't know how much that is yet. But say that that can make you 10,000 gold a day. If you can set that up in 2 hours and then you have 10,000 gold a day, then that's great, right? But say that you spent 2, 3, 4 hours on it. Oh, well, now we're making 20,000 gold. But maybe you spent 2, 3, or 4 times as much time on it, where instead you could have used another level 70 that you have and have another character ready to make 10k. And say that you spent 3 or 4 hours on the first one and it only doubled your profit potential, then that's not worth it. And but that's always a matter of whether, you know, you're going for quantity or quality and the price points. And because of concentration, there's going to be so many points and professions that are worth it. And, you know, depending on so many different levels, because if, again, just to give you guys an idea, if you look at something like this, right, not only do you have to worry about the crafting cost for this bolt, but you also have to worry about the crafting cost for the exquisite Weaver Cloth bolt and the Spool of Dusk Ret, and then you have to worry about the crafting cost or farming time for the materials that make these two. So there's so many levels to it where you can potentially use concentration to lower the crafting cost, or other people can do that. So there's a lot of math involved, a lot of considerations. So there's going to be a lot of profit margin potential. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does. I'm probably going to be going over it a million times anyway on stream. But either way, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you when the War Within launches.